Hi, I'm Greg Gutfeld with Kimberly Guilfoyle, Juan Williams, Jesse Waters, and a gum wrapper is her beach towel. Dana Perino, The Five. Yesterday, a left-wing creep opened fire on GOP lawmakers practicing for tonight's game.
Do we know where he's at? Do we know where he's at?
He's behind home plate. You call 911?
I assume people have been calling 911 already.
Now, despite the attack, the lawmakers took the field tonight at National Stadium in D.C. More on that, as well as an update on Congressman Scalise later. So since the shooting, we've seen a lot of finger pointing. After preaching unity, Nancy Pants blames the Republicans.
Coarsen political behavior. Do you see this as equally afflicting the left and the right?
No, I do not. Somewhere in the 90s, Republicans decided on a politics of personal destruction as they went after the Clintons, and that is the provenance of it, and that's what has continued.
Sorry, lady. The politics of destruction started way before that, and it's back for one reason. The attacks on discourse. If you shut down discourse, then there's no stopgap between rage and violence. Discourse keeps us from killing each other. So knowing this, let's ask these questions. Are conservatives the ones shouting people down on campus? Are conservatives blockading offices and physically attacking speakers? Are conservatives rioting after elections? Are conservatives harassing professors for calling out racism? Are conservatives stabbing police horses? Are they throwing urine on young women? This attack on discourse isn't a right-wing thing, it's a left-wing thing, who perfected it for decades, seeking to subvert the West. I don't know one righty who wears a Che shirt, but I remember Bill Ayers. He set off bombs. Whose side is he on again? It's the same side targeting dissent with violence now. Their premise is simple. If they think you're evil, not just wrong, then there can be no dialogue and only violence. So there's the rub. If a person agrees with you that it's time for calmness, then they aren't the problem. It's the people who embrace violence who are. I'd ask them to stop right now, but I don't think they watch The Five. Juan, Nancy said it all started with the Clintons. Do you think that's accurate? I mean, don't you think the 70s, it started before that with the Vietnam War and demonizing?
Before.
Yeah, even I would say my theory is it started with Nixon and blaming him for the Vietnam War and calling soldiers baby killers. I think that's where it came.
No. I think in this modern era, our politics really have roots in that Clinton impeachment and the very personal kind of attacks that came forward during that period. I mean, then I would go forward, Greg, from there to the 2000 election and the kind of acrimony and accusations about cheating in the election and the Supreme Court decision. And then we had a moment of unity around 9/11, but then you go to 2004 and the Swift boating charges against John Kerry and the charges of blood for money against President Bush. It got so personal, so heated. So I think she's right about that. But I just think it's also important to say that Pelosi didn't invite this conversation. She said we shouldn't be having this conversation today. She wanted to celebrate the idea that we are family, that the Congress people across political lines are playing in the game.
You know, Jesse, I remember the Bork hearings. I'm that old. I remember how Ronald Reagan was portrayed as Hitler.
I wasn't going to say it.
Yeah, but I mean, this stuff has been, it is always, the radical left is always trafficked in violence because they romanticize it as part of a revolutionary ideology. So it's natural, I would think, that it comes from there.
Yeah, you made that great point last night. This is just in their bloodstream. It's what they do. To Juan's point about the personal destruction of the 90s, I think it was Bill Clinton who destroyed his own presidency by making a dumb personal decision. So let's just make sure we have that clear. Nancy Pelosi is politicizing an assassination attempt against her own colleague. She didn't even wait 24 hours And the guy is still in the hospital. She's pointing fingers at Republicans after a Democrat pointed a gun at Republicans and squeezed the trigger. I think right now what you're seeing is the media and the Democrats have almost accepted death and violence in the political discourse. And when celebrities go out there and they talk about killing and assassination and blowing up the White House, no one in the media draws the line for them. They don't say stop, so they don't know where the line is. And, you know, you didn't have 1,000 newspaper reporters, 1,000 TV personalities, 5 networks, and all this mainstream media constantly trying to destroy President Obama and trying to impeach President Obama. You didn't have that. And right now you just have an avalanche of negativity. You don't have Republican politicians going out there and saying that, you know, President Obama kills people and is a killer. You have that right now against President Trump. So I think one of the real reasons the left is so bloodthirsty is because Trump threatens their existence. If he succeeds and America First succeeds, their credibility and their coalitions, they're done. So this is life and death for the left. And I think the more Trump does succeed, I think the more violent it's going to get.
You know, Kimberly, Jesse brings up what the right is always being accused of. And I can't blame people for not liking the right, because we're being told that they've rolled back civil rights. Yeah. They're secret white supremacists.
Don't forget women.
They're sexist. They're guilty of treason. They sentence people to death if they ever try to change Medicaid. And the Paris Accords, that's going to cause mass extinction. So if you read what the Democrats or the left say about us, I would hate us too.
Yeah, it's like as a DA, and we have the charging sheet, like they've thrown the book at it. Anything else we can blame them on, where we're careless, reckless with climate, everything. So basically all evils or things that are wrong in the world, they point and say, okay, it's the Republicans. But you have to think, when you think back about the time about Democrats and all the names that they have called, that he was conservative or Republican or people that voted, you know, for President Trump, that you're racist, that you're sexist, you're this, anything that they can think of, they have said. But how do the Democrats explain all the middle class and working men and women that came out and voted for President Trump? Are all of those people bad too? I think they forget, because they're in this sort of like very vocal minority bubble of extremist language and alt-left, that they might be actually offending a large number of hardworking voting Americans out there who aren't out there spewing stuff, but they're listening and hearing what's been going on. And then you see this, and then the poor taste and judgment to not cancel the play in Central Park, the assassination, with what happened with the attempted assassination of Congressman Scalise and the others there. It's just, you know, how did it get this bad? Yeah.
You know, Dana, what I was trying to get at is like when whether it's Pelosi talking to a Republican about lowering the tenor of the discourse, those aren't the people you need to reach. I fear that it's the people that you want to reach. You lost them. Nobody in Antifa is going to listen to any of us.
I was actually, Jesse and I were talking in the green room before the show, and I was saying something that all of these conversations about softening the rhetoric, we're like having amongst ourselves, and we basically, none of us are about to go out and shoot somebody because of their views might be opposing to ours. On the Ben Shapiro show today, he was talking about the roots of this actually go all the way back with the left demonizing the right during the JFK assassination. And basically, if you look at what happened then from the media standpoint, once talk radio sort of comes into play and Fox News is successful, you saw the left get really resentful that there were successful media outlets that were providing this counterweight to what had been out there for so long and never been challenged. Now with social media, you actually are taking a lot of the networks and the newspapers out of the equation. Most people get their news online, and a lot of this, I think, is one thing that's very sad, and we haven't had a lot of reporting about this yet. But a lot of these people, like Hodgkinson, the shooter, when he's on those websites that are, want to destroy the Republican Party or whatever that was, that he was part of a Facebook group, a lot of that content is fueled by fake news, so it's like actual fake news coming from Russia, Macedonia, people that are actually like wholesale making up stories and trying to stoke anger and trying to figure out a way that they can actually make money because of the clicks. So there's a whole different sort of media thing that is happening that wasn't there 60 years ago, but that is building and now is like basically throwing fuel on the fire.
Juan, can I ask you, I just read today about the Golden State Warriors not going to the White House. In terms of discourse, couldn't they go and talk to the guy and say, here's why we're mad at you? I sometimes fear that people avoid that because what if they're wrong, or what if they find out he's not so bad?
Right.
No, I think people have a legitimate right to say, I don't like your politics, I don't like your fear-mongering, I don't like your appeal
Then go
to
and
anger.
say it.
You don't have to go and say it. I think by their absence, it's being said very loudly.
Or is that-
I mean, you look at, by the way, when I listen to this, I think to myself, I just look at daily politics, and I see tens of millions of dollars being spent down in Georgia to demonize Nancy Pelosi. She has become, what's the opposite of a whipping boy, a whipping girl? She's become a piñata for the right. And I just think, well, what's the basis of this? But you know what? It doesn't matter anymore because in the mind of the right wing, she is bad, and they find that they can raise money, generate votes, and anger.
You're talking about the special election in Georgia?
Yeah.
But the Democrats have spent just as much money, if not more, and they're actually and their polling shows that he's in stronger position to beat Karen Handel on Tuesday. There's a long way to go. Maybe that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But they basically have spent all of their money demonizing President Trump.
Well, no, they go after Trump on the basis of his policies. I'm saying...
What about her policies?
Well, that's not what they do, Kimberly. They go after her in terms of she is the leader and she is this bad... She's a witch. It's like they're having a...
Can I say one thing about Pelosi, though? Pelosi was given the opportunity when she was asked that question, which side is going to take any responsibility for some of this violence? And instead of saying, she could have said, the left sometimes gets out of control and we need to talk to them and make sure that they don't do that. Or she could have said even, it's both sides. Both sides are wrong. We contributed. No. She pointed the finger at Republicans a day after a Republican was shot by a hardcore Democrat activist.
In response, she said, this is not the day for this conversation.
She answered the question and had the conversation.
No, because she answered a question she was pushed on. But to my mind,
she doesn't have to answer like that.
The question is, if you live in an age where you see immigrants demonized, where you see Black Lives Matter called out as evil and terrible and anti-police, and then there's someone you say, well, who's saying these things? Why is it that there's violence coming from the at the Trump rallies, and the president, the man-elected president, says, I'll pay your legal bills? Ted Nugent insulting the president, talking about,
some of these illegal immigrants are crossing the border illegally and then committing crimes.
Let me just say,
and stealing jobs. And some of the Black Lives Matter people are chanting about killing cops.
Well,
There's a lot of stuff to go around, Juan.
President Obama's not a monkey. How about that?
What does that have to do with anything?
Oh, because of the images that came from the far right, from Ted Nugent, Carl Palladino. I could go on, but I'm not doing it.
Don't point to a random sign at the Tea Party, Juan. I'm talking about elected officials and the people in the media.
The interesting thing is, Juan, you're suggesting that what Trump says or does incites violence, but the problem is it's inciting violence from the other side. So think about that.
The guy who got punched in the face at the Trump rally?
That was one thing. You can find one exception proves the rule. Coming up, a live report from the congressional baseball game underway after yesterday's political assassination attempt, and an update on Congressman Scalise's condition. That's next.
Members of Congress, their staffs, and baseball fans across the country for supporting tonight's congressional baseball game. By playing tonight, you are showing the world that we will not be intimidated by threats, acts of violence, or assaults on our democracy. On this special night, I leave you with three great American words that for generations have torn down barriers, built bridges of unity, and defied those who have sought to pull us apart. Ladies and gentlemen, let's play ball.
That's President Trump delivering a very special message on a very special night. The annual congressional baseball game for charity is underway as planned, despite yesterday's attempted assassination of GOP lawmakers practicing for the big event. Peter Doocy is live at Nationals Park in Washington, D.C. with an update on the game and on Congressman Scalise's condition. Peter.
Dana, just as most of the 20,000 plus people that are here at Nationals Park tonight were settling into their seats, but before the game started, the entire stadium fell silent, and everyone watched as the Democratic team and the Republican team all headed out to second base to take a knee and pray with the House chaplain on the spot where Congressman Steve Scalise would have been standing tonight if he hadn't been targeted by a gunman while practicing for tonight's game. A photo of Scalise then appeared on the Jumbotron as a member of the Republican team, and Democrats and Republicans alike all rose in 42 seconds of a standing ovation. A few minutes later, an emailed update came from the hospital where doctors say that Scalise is going to be there for some time, but he has improved in the last 24 hours. MedStar Hospital, which is about 5 miles from Nationals Park, also announced tonight that the House Majority Whip had a second surgery today for internal injuries and for the broken bone in his leg. And for the first time since yesterday's ambush in Alexandria, one of the men who helped stop the gunman, Capitol Police Officer David Bailey, appeared here using crutches to get to the mound at the center of the diamond before dropping one of his crutches and tossing a first pitch straight to the catcher, Roberto Clemente Jr. The entire crowd erupted in some of the loudest applause that you will hear. And a few minutes after that, President Trump did go on the big video board with that somber message about the importance of playing tonight's game. His daughter Ivanka and son-in-law Jared Kushner are here in attendance. And I can tell you from my spot here in center field, in the outfield, that when President Trump was done talking, there was loud applause on the Democratic side over on the left field bleachers and on the Republican side over on the right side bleachers. Dana?
And for good reason. All right. Thanks, Peter, for that update. We appreciate it. Jesse, one of the things that we showed in the video there, it was the prayer, the huddle of both teams, and you said that was very moving when you saw it.
It was very moving, and I think symbolism like that in politics and in sports is very powerful, especially that first pitch we just saw thrown out. I mean, you get chills when you watch that, and you get chills when you watch this. You know, it's reminiscent of George W. Bush throwing out the first pitch right after 9/11 at Yankee Stadium. Not to that level, but I mean, those moments really grip the nation. Jesse Owens in the Olympics, and when they have the F-16s do the flyovers at the football games, I think everybody, Republican or Democrat, can appreciate those moments that bind us together as Americans.
And it sounds, Kimberly, like Congressman Scalise doing possibly a little better after that surgery today.
You know, thanks be to God, because everybody was very, worried publicly, but also privately in terms of his condition and how he was doing. So I think all the amazing prayers for him, I believe, are helping. I'm so happy for his family, and I hope he continues to fight through. It's very difficult when you have an injury like that, and just in terms of the bullet not exiting the body and the amount of damage to your internal organs, and they try to stabilize him so that then they could do some follow-up surgeries to help him and fix his leg. And so he's got a long road ahead of him, but obviously a tremendous amount of support, which is fantastic. And this was very moving. I thought the president making the comments and doing this, I know he would have liked to go, but couldn't because of the security issues, not enough timing, but that was nice that Jared and Ivanka went, and his comments yesterday as well. So let's really take this and make something incredible out of horrible, violence and tragedy, and take an opportunity to treat each other well and not go back.
Juan, you still live in Washington, D.C. Wondering what you're hearing from people there about the mood of the city and anything else that you heard from colleagues down there.
Well, I mean, I think everybody is, I'm not sure everybody in the country is aware of it, but Cedric Richmond is the star pitcher for the Democrats, and he's a congressman from Louisiana and chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus. Cedric Richmond was also a star baseball player at Morehouse, and so he's like a real baseball player. And the thing is,
I think he hit a triple earlier.
But he wins a lot. But last year he lost, and so he and Scalise, they know each other from the Louisiana legislature. Last night, and this is kind of the inside Capitol Hill talk of the day, Richmond spent time with Scalise and Scalise's family, and I don't think most people would appreciate or understand that this strong Democrat from New Orleans is pals with Scalise, who is a strong Republican.
And didn't Congressman Richmond come to defend Scalise, who was attacked
on racial
unfairly
grounds,
on racial issues?
And something strongly touted to me by my son.
That's true. That's true. Greg, you enjoying the game so far?
I was just thinking how ironic it would be if there was a brawl. Like if they were like, we're talking about unity, and all of a sudden there's a brushback pitch. Somebody raises it and goes, it only lasted like for. But anyway, the one thing I find like refreshing is that people are talking about not just. I'm glad that Scalise is hopefully getting better, but the two other victims, Matt Mika, who was still in critical condition, and he's suffered massive trauma, was shot in the chest. He can't breathe on his own. He's got to have more surgery. So he's. There are other, and then there's this guy, Zach Barth, who was shot in the leg and then shows up for work the next day. And I'm like, makes me think, I have to think about him.
How amazing is
I know
that?
the next time I'm debating about going to work because I have an ocular migraine or, I have a stuffy nose. I got to think of this guy, Zach Barth, who limped in after being shot, It's like, I got no excuses.
Thank you. I'm going to remind you.
Dedicated staff there on Capitol Hill.
And
that's
Bobby
for
Jindal
sure.
went too to visit Scalise, which is
Mr.
nice.
Scalise, that's awesome. All right, despite yesterday's political violence, a theater group here in New York City is still putting on a play that depicts an assassination of President Trump. Why doesn't the left want it shut down? Analysis up ahead.
Reported on Monday, the New York Public Theater is putting on a production this week of Julius Caesar that features the assassination of a President Trump-like character. Despite yesterday's assassination attempt on Republicans, the play is still going on as scheduled. Why isn't the left helping to get this shut down now that they're all of a sudden calling for unity? Time Warner CEO says his company is proud to sponsor the theater that's putting on this trash. It's not the first example of anti-Trump entertainers promoting violence. Kathy Griffin just held that bloodied, severed head. And who could forget this Snoop Dogg music video from March?
Oh, boy.
So, Greg, would the theater pulling the performance on the heels of this Scalise assassination attempt be admitting to the left that maybe some of this stuff does have an effect and that's why they don't want to do it?
You know, it's weird. I differentiate between this, whether it's abysmal art or not, and what I talked about before about decades of anti-West fervor. I don't want them to stop it. I mean, maybe if they took a day off, that's fine. But I don't
Symbolically.
But I don't want them to stop it. I want people to go there and feel really weird and feel a bit of shame when they're there, because they went there to look at the spectacle and to feel how funny this is. If they go and they feel a little bit of shame, and maybe they feel a little stupid, and that maybe this isn't that edgy, and this is just a way to score cool points. You never become less cool making fun of Trump in this kind of arena.
Yeah, because the arena is populated by Democrats. I mean, it's a theater production in Manhattan, and it's probably being, I think, seen by mostly Democrats, and it's there's a Democratic media here that's not calling this thing out. They're supportive of it. The mayor's a Democrat. You think that's why they're kind of in a cocoon?
Well, possibly, and I think that they believe that there is honor in defiance, so that they feel like that makes them look courageous. But I'm also, again, as I said the other day, I'm for the First Amendment. For as appalling as it is, I wouldn't attend it, and I wouldn't support it, and I wouldn't sponsor it. I do think that Time Warner it's interesting because I think that it's almost like they're making a play to help bolster their brand by being defiant. So they're making a choice.
Yeah.
And whether that works for them, if they can sleep at night, whatever. But if they think that it helps them with the bottom line, you might see more of this. There's a real difference here. And if you look at something that, Ariana Grande, who was giving the concert in Manchester, England, that then there was a horrible terror attack. A week later, she returns with several other stars, basically to fight back against terrorism. And you think, well, gosh, maybe could alter the play for a night even, as artists, to try to help everybody. If we're all supposed to improve our rhetoric, why couldn't it start with them?
Yeah, they could have done some sort of symbolic choice, alter it, or maybe take a night off. Kimberly, the New York Times editorialized on this and said the response that you're seeing on places like Fox, maybe, it's exaggerated outrage to get back at liberals. What do you make about that interpretation of this analysis?
Short-sighted and inaccurate, not very responsible, because I think what you see here, this has been a big progression coming forward by the media, by academia, by the elites that want to sit there and cast dispersions and destabilize, I believe, the government and a duly elected president of the United States with these comments, this vitriol, which is inciting violence. And it's in such horribly poor taste that they're still going forward for this, just to be sensational. It's like there's no even contemplative thought for decency or civility to do this. Yes, is it their First Amendment right? But it doesn't mean that it's okay or that it's, that it's good. And for Time Warner to stake a claim, I mean, it seems like they're like jonesing after the MSNBC people and trying to, maybe get some of, their viewership by doing this and like grandstanding and at what cost to society and to people's lives, I mean, how many people have to be injured or, attempted assassinations for them to wake up and realize that this is serious?
That's actually a good point. So we showed the Kathy Griffin beheading, Juan. We had the Snoop Dogg assassination. But I have a list of 15 examples of celebrities here saying they want to kill President Trump. Some of these things I can't even read. They're so disgusting. And these are high-profile celebrities. At what point and what has to happen for people to just calm down here? Is it going to take another situation like we had yesterday? I mean, where's the line?
Well, I hope this is the line. I've heard today from people saying, this is my break point. I just think, we need to cool out a little bit. And I've appreciated that. I think that's a good idea, and I think it's horrific. I mean, you can have differences with President Trump, but you don't want violence in this country. And by the way, if you actually have ever read or viewed Julius Caesar, things don't turn out so great for the people who are involved in that assassination. So the director of the play, in defending it, says this is an opportunity to chew over politics in a way that allows us to not be engaged in violence, but to actually be thoughtful about it. And that's what art is, and that's why the First Amendment exists. And I don't think that people who are my conservative friends, who always are objecting to folks who would shut down discussion, debate on a college campus, would say, oh, now I want to shut it down in the theater, and it's a Shakespearean play. It's not even some new play. And of course, we have the example of it was done with Obama as Julius Caesar not long ago in Minneapolis.
Well, I wonder if the people watching the play would see it as a pro-Trump performance. I'm not so sure.
No, and just like the thing, it's interesting with Snoop, My objections to Snoop have to do with pornography and celebration of violence and the image he projects of black men, which I think is tawdry. I wish people would get mad at that rather than that pop gun stupidity.
Yeah, and against women, too.
That's a good point.
That's what I said.
Yeah.
All right. President Trump fired up on Twitter again today on the witch hunt and on the obstruction of justice insanity when we return.
Welcome back. We're still keeping a close eye on the congressional baseball game in Washington, D.C., and we'll return to that in a moment. But first, President Trump firing back at the report he's now under investigation by the special counsel for a possible obstruction of justice, tweeting, "You are witnessing the single greatest witch hunt in American political history." He also offered this reminder: Crooked Hillary destroyed phones with hammer, bleached emails, and had husband meet with AG days before she was cleared. And they talk about obstruction? Ken Starr famously investigated the Clinton administration, and he's defending Mr. Trump.
It's too soon to tell. From what I have seen, and of course we don't know a whole lot, the answer is no. But it is going to be investigated, and so we will soon know. Obstruction of justice is really a very hard crime to make out. It's not just you want the investigation to go away, you suggest that the investigation goes away. You've got to take really affirmative action.
All right, Dana, so Ken Starr there on that clip from this morning defending President Trump and saying essentially, there isn't any evidence thus far proffered of obstruction of justice.
Well, and he would know. I mean, he was one of the most famous special counsels in our lifetime for sure. And then I would point people to Karl Rove's column today in the Wall Street Journal, in which he talks about having been in the sights of of a special prosecutor, that was Patrick Fitzgerald, who knew on the first day that the underlying issue of who had leaked Valerie... Okay, they're telling us that the game has ended in Washington, D.C., and I believe that the Democrats prevailed in this game. But a wonderful bipartisan event.
It's fake news.
And
it does not have any bearing on the future of what will happen in Congress.
20,000 in attendance.
Hopefully they'll all remember. Yeah, a really great night, and it was fun to be able to carry it tonight. I've never actually been an announcer for a baseball game, but I think I might keep this.
Do you know what this ritual is?
As a possibility.
What this is called?
What's this called?
This is when the happy high line.
Right. Okay, the happy high line. Good job, good job, good game, good game.
Exactly.
If I can say, I do think that people should look at, back to the topic at hand. Karl Rove was the target of Patrick Fitzgerald for a long time, even though, and so was Scooter Libby, even though Patrick Fitzgerald knew on the first day that the underlying issue of who had leaked Valerie Plame's name was done by Dick Armitage, the Deputy Secretary of State. And there were other people in Washington, including people senior at the State Department, who knew about this too and still said nothing and let people twist in the wind like that. So I can understand the concern. However, I don't think the Washington Post story should be a cause for concern for the president. And I also think that Bob Mueller is a guy who is basically, his character is being attacked right now. And he's not a showboat like Jim Comey, which was the accusation about him. He's keeping his head down. You don't see him out there defending himself. And I'm sure that he wants to wrap this up as soon as everybody else does.
I'm sure. Okay, Jesse.
Well, I mean, there are a lot of leaks coming out of Mueller's investigative team.
No, actually,
they're not?
The leaks started after they started interviewing and the lawyers for those people. I think that's where those came from.
Perhaps.
It's not necessarily from their team. There haven't been any leaks in 30 days from that team.
Well, perhaps, but I think right now, after you see this report, you're wondering who's leaking. We don't know who's leaking. Someone's talking, so
the White House was
it's not a good look for
too.
the investigation. It does not reflect well on the investigation. Let's just put it that way. And it raises questions, again, of impartiality. But if you look at what you just said earlier, actually yesterday, I think this is just the first normal step in an investigative process where you ask people what happened. It looks like a fact-finding investigation. There have been a lot of leaks that have turned out to be wrong, though. I think in 1 week alone in May, the Washington Post had 4 stories, all turned out to be wrong. Deputy Attorney General threatened to quit. Wrong. FBI Director Comey fired after asking for more investigative funds. Wrong. Trump revealed classified information to the Russians. Wrong. Republicans treat rape as a pre-existing condition. Wrong. Also, suspicious timing on the announcement of the Washington Post story. So I think we just have to wait until the facts come out.
All right. So Juan, your thoughts on this, on the timing, the leaks, and also if you'd like to make a comment on the game.
Well, I don't know much about the game, but I think the politics here and politics, how it impacts the press. I think there's a legitimate reason for Jesse to say, hey, were these stories right or wrong, for Trump to question? I don't know about the witch hunt stuff. And I think that this is pretty serious because today, Vice President Pence went and got his own lawyer. I mean, this is not something that I would say, oh, you know, what's the big deal? And then all of a sudden the vice president's getting his own lawyer. I agree. That's a pretty serious deal.
Ridiculous if he didn't. I mean, you have to be able to, especially with what's going on. You just have no idea where people are going with these things.
Well, that's correct.
Innocence isn't going to matter. If they're coming after you, you have to be represented regardless. I mean, otherwise you have a big problem. Greggins.
I like Greggins. I like it when everyone calls me. You're the only person who calls me Greggins. Again, this shows that the media and the Democrats are in cahoots. They changed their narrative exactly at the same time. So originally it was going to be collusion, and that fell apart. And they immediately, everybody rushed to obstruction. But you can't obstruct a false narrative. I mean, it just can't happen. So when that falls apart, we need to predict what the next charge is going to be. Is Donald Trump going to be accused of building a time machine that took him back to the 90s and he set Monica Lewinsky up with Bill Clinton?
A gold time machine.
A gold time machine. Or maybe he drugged Hillary so she tripped going into the van. I bet we could come up with some really juicy little paths for the Dems in the media to collude on. There's the collusion, America.
And there you go. And again, you're looking at the game there in Washington, D.C. Bipartisan gamesmanship in a good way, coming together to raise a lot of money for a very worthwhile charity tonight. And obviously everyone thinking about Congressman Scalise, the majority whip. Now, when the Five returns, the father of Otto Warmbier, the American held captive by North Korea, lashes out at the brutal regime that just sent his son home in an unresponsive state. And he also had some words for the Obama administration. That's all next.